You don't expect to hear the crunch of metal on steel when you're harvesting corn at a steady 12 miles an hour. But that's exactly what snapped me out of my tractor's rhythm that September afternoon, the kind of sound that doesn't belong anywhere near a farm, let alone on land you've spent half your life defending. I'll never forget it. I was up in the cab, humming to the beat of the old Massey Ferguson, thinking more about supper than anything else, when this screech ripped through the air, jolting me like a bad memory. When I climbed down, dust kicking up around my boots, there she was, Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, halfway out of her pearl-white SUV, jabbing her finger like she'd caught me trying to steal her crown. Her voice sliced through the corn, shrill enough to spook the crows. "You tried to kill me. You swerved at me. I'm calling 911 right now." I almost laughed, I really did. The idea that anyone could swerve at anything in a tractor built before man landed on the Munitz comedy. This machine was older than me, steady as an oak, and about as fast as a tortoise on tranquilizers. If someone crashed into it, you could bet your last dollar they were either texting or too entitled to look both ways. But Karen? She didn't stumble out of that SUV like someone who'd made a mistake. She landed like a performer hitting her mark, phone shaking in her hand as she dialed 911, voice trembling just right for the audience. "Ma'am, I was harvesting," I tried, leaning back on the tractor tire, keeping my tone calm, the way you do when you've spent years in the army learning that volume only makes things worse. "On my land." You drove into the field lane and hit me. Her jaw dropped. She was scandalized that I wouldn't just roll over and play villain for her show. "Your land? This is HOA property. You're trespassing with that death machine." And she flung her arm toward my corn like she expected the National Guard to parachute in and back her up. Let me back up a sec. My family's had this land for decades, but after Dad passed, my brother sold most of it off to a developer who, in all their wisdom, carved the world's most picturesque subdivision right into our cornfields, naming streets Golden Harvest Lane and Amberfield Court like irony was part of the building code. Then came the HOA, sprouting up like mushrooms after a rain, writing rules about mailbox colors and the proper shade of beige for shutters. They ruled every inch of their kingdom, but not my farm, never my farm. I reclaimed what I could, rebuilt my fences, and kept on working the land the way my dad taught me. Boundaries marked in blood, sweat, and stubbornness. But Karen never forgave me for that. Not once. From day one, she made herself my shadow. Letters in my mailbox, noise complaints during community rest hours, warnings about dust pollution. She even stapled copies of the HOA bylaws to my fence, as if those rules could reach past their manicured lawns and into my corn rows. When the letters didn't work, she ramped things up, yelling at me at the end of my driveway, threatening lawsuits and fines, waving that clipboard like she had the sheriff's badge tucked inside it. Most folks would have sold the last of the land, moved to somewhere with less drama, or at least learned to keep their heads down. But after 2 decades dodging mortars overseas, I wasn't about to get bullied by a lady with a pearl necklace and a vendetta. I played the long game. I waved. I smiled. I let her burn herself out. But ramming her SUV into my tractor? That was new even for her. That wasn't just harassment. That was reckless. And as I watched her on the phone, crying to the dispatcher about a maniac with a tractor, I realized she was aiming to frame me as the aggressor. She sobbed about me endangering the neighborhood, voice rising in pitch with each new lie. He tried to run me off the roads, and someone quick. She glared at me like she'd just thrown down a royal gauntlet. "You're finished," she hissed. "When they get here, you'll regret this." I just raised an eyebrow and leaned against the Massey. "We'll see." It was in that moment I knew this wasn't just another petty squabble. This was war, and I was the last guy she wanted as an enemy, because I wasn't playing defense anymore. I had patience, evidence, and a stubborn streak that had outlasted much scarier folks than her. She thought she was tightening the noose, but all she was doing was pulling it tighter around her own neck. The wait for the sheriff felt like an hour. Karen paced in circles, muttering to herself, rehearsing her lines, while I just climbed back in the cab and shut the engine off. The more I ignored her, the more she fumed. When the sheriff's cruiser finally rolled up, headlights cutting through the dust, she was ready to unleash her performance. And I'll admit, I wondered if maybe this time she'd win. People like Karen know how to sound credible, tears, pearls, authority. But truth stands tall, especially when you let liars dig their own grave. Deputy Randall stepped out, his flashlight sweeping over the scene, the dented bumper on her SUV, the undamaged steel side of my tractor. Karen flew at him like a damsel in distress. "Thank God you're here. Arrest him before he hurts someone else." Randall, all local grit and patience, just rested a hand on his notepad. "Ma'am, why don't you start from the beginning?" She didn't realize the second she crashed into my tractor and dialed 911. She was playing a game outside her league. The sheriff's office isn't the HOA. The county isn't her playground, and I wasn't the kind of neighbor who gets bullied into submission. She fired the first shot, sure, but wars are won by standing your ground. Karen launched into her story, tears and all, but Randall cut through it with a single line. "Ma'am, that tractor tops out at 12 miles an hour. Hard to run someone off the road unless they're parked in front of it." She stammered. Switch stories now. I was blocking the road, forcing her to pass. I stayed quiet, hands in my pockets, silence working its magic. Randall turned to me. "Anything to add?" "Not really. I was harvesting corn on my own land." She hit me. The flash in Karen's eyes told me she knew she was losing. Randall wrote up the details, measured the skid marks, and checked my access rights. Everything lined up. When he looked back up, Karen demanded, "So what are you going to do? Arrest him?" Randall shook his head. "What I see here is property damage caused by your vehicle, ma'am. If you want to press this, we can get highway patrol out here, but from what I see, you'll be paying for repairs." You should have seen her face. White as a sheet, then red as a barn. "I'm on the HOA board. He doesn't belong here." Randall just grinned. This whole subdivision was built on his family's farm. If anyone's got the right to operate a tractor, it's him. She sputtered, but he wasn't listening anymore. She stormed off, spraying gravel, and Randall whistled. "You've got yourself one hell of a neighbor." "Tell me about it," I said, but I knew the storm wasn't over. Sure enough, the next morning, I found an HOA letter in my mailbox, no envelope, just threats about dangerous operations. Fines in the tens of thousands if I didn't cease farming immediately. Never mind that my land wasn't under their jurisdiction. It was escalation, plain and simple. I sat at the table, coffee cooling, and realized anger would only feed her fire. So I did the only thing that would truly infuriate her. I kept harvesting, tractors rolling at dawn, waving at her whenever she passed. She ramped up the pettiness complaints to the county, fake photos of pollution, orange cones at the end of my lane. I moved them every day just to show I wasn't rattled. Then came the real escalation a week later. I was pulled over by highway patrol. "Reckless agricultural driving," they said, deadpan. They checked the tractor, found nothing, and admitted the complaint came from my neighborhood. The whole town was buzzing about it. My cousin texted me laughing emojis. Even Randall called to warn me Karen was playing with fire. But she didn't run on luck, she ran on persistence. That night, my phone buzzed. An anonymous Fotami tractor's headlights glowing. The message: "This is a violation. End it now." No signature needed. She'd crossed from nuisance into obsession. The next morning, my mailbox was bent at a wild angle. The post cracked, the flag gone, matching the fresh scrape on her SUV. It was deliberate, and it was her. I didn't bite, not yet. Instead, I bought the most indestructible mailbox on the market, cast iron, concrete mounted. I installed it while Karen watered her flowers, glaring daggers. By nightfall, my new mailbox could have survived a tornado. But the war wasn't about property or noise. It was about power. She hated that she couldn't bend me, and every failure only made her try harder. A week later, an official-looking HOA notice arrived at me. Tractor was an environmental hazard. The hypocrisy nearly made me spit coffee. Her gas-guzzling SUV burned more fuel in a week than my old tractor did all harvest. I ignored the letter, but the next shoe dropped fast. 3 days later, Deputy Randall called. Someone had filed air quality complaints about my farm. He laughed. The inspector found nothing. "You've got a fan club. and their president's name starts with K. Folks were starting to notice. That weekend, I hosted my cousin's kids for a bonfire. Laughter crackled under the stars. But at 9, Karen's SUV parked at the end of my lane, lights glaring through the smoke. She didn't drive up, just sat there. A claim on the night, a warning. She left, but next morning, a nervous young deputy showed up. Someone reported an armed man making threats. False 911 call. I stood calm, hands visible, explained I'd been drinking coffee. The deputy realized it was bogus. But the danger was clear. Karen was playing with fire. Randall called, angry as I'd ever heard him. She files one more. We're pressing charges. I started taking precautions, trail cameras on the lane, one in the barn, just in case. Didn't take long. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. Karen, in her bathrobe, snapping photos of my barn. Deliberate, methodical. She was building a fantasy violation for her next move. I saved every clip. A few weeks into harvest, she sent another notice, claiming I was running an illegal business. I laughed. This farm existed decades before the HOA. Still, I knew she was building towards something big. And it came. 3 cruisers rolled up at dawn, deputies in tactical vests. I froze, old instincts firing. Randall led the team, jaw set. Karen had filed a report illegal firearms in my barn, brandishing at neighbors. Randall cleared the scene quickly, then said, she's out of control. We'll file charges. But you need to know she's desperate, and desperate people get sloppy. News spread like wildfire. The town laughed, but Karen didn't quit. Flyers appeared everywhere, warning of reckless farming and danger to children. At first, neighbors were wary, but cracks appeared. One guy tore down a flyer in front of her. Another knocked on my door and apologized, slipping me a copy. Karen was losing her grip. Patience is a weapon. I stacked the evidence, camera footage, false calls, photos of her trespassing. The breaking point? Saturday morning. Fixing a fence. She rolled up, clipboard in hand. Final warning: the HOA has voted to fine you $50,000 for ongoing violations. If you don't pay, we'll seize your property. I just stared at her, then said, that's fascinating, considering I'm not under your HOA. File what you want, the only thing you're seizing is your own credibility. She stormed off, but I had everything saved for my lawyer. That night, Karen returned in her bathrobe, flashlights slicing through the corn, desperate for evidence no one believed existed. I realized she wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting the collapse of her own authority. Folks like Karen would burn the kingdom down before letting the crown slip. So I let her keep digging. 5 weeks in, everything boiled over. Karen staged a public trial outside the clubhouse. Half the neighborhood gathered, her ranting about danger and illegal farming. When she paused, I held up my deed and county plat map. Karen, show them where my land ends and yours begins. She sputtered about grandfather clauses. But the crowd wasn't buying it. That night, she rammed my mailbox again, caught on camera clear as day. My lawyer said, that's a federal crime now. Randall came out, measured the wreck, shook his head. This one's going to stick. Karen's grip was slipping. A week later, county inspectors showed up about chemical storage, another Karen complaint. They found nothing. The inspectors muttered about wasted time. The HOA board started meeting without her. Tom, my neighbor, grinned. She's hanging herself. But Karen went big one last time. Another staged 911 call. This time live-streamed, screaming I was threatening her with my tractor. Randall arrived, ticketed her for misuse of emergency services. Neighbors laughed openly now. Karen was unraveling, thrashing as the crown slipped. And then silence. For a week, nothing. Then news vans rolled in. Karen had gone public. She stood out front, pearls gleaming, spinning tales for the cameras. But when a reporter turned to me, I just pulled out the trail cam footage. Her at 2 a.m., smashing my mailbox, filing false reports. Here's the real story. That night, the segment aired her lies exposed, her reputation in shreds. The HOA called a meeting, packed house. George, the vice president, read the charges. This board is considering a vote to remove Karen for misconduct. The room buzzed. Karen raged, finger jabbing, but nobody followed. 6-1 her only support was herself. She stormed out, but it wasn't over yet. 3 days later, a lawsuit landed on my porch drafted by Karen herself. My lawyer laughed. This is nonsense. Let's file our own for harassment, defamation, property damage, and false reporting. We did. Court day came in late October. The judge listened. The jury didn't buy her story. She was found guilty, fined, and slapped with a restraining order. The neighborhood changed. People lingered on porches again. The new HOA president focused on real problems. Karen tried to sell her house, but no one wanted it. Eventually, she moved her for sale sign, a tombstone, to her reign. I never saw her again. Truth is, I didn't need to. I won by doing the one thing she never could: staying patient, staying calm, and letting her collapse under the weight of her own obsession. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a glass of bourbon, watching the cornfield sway, and remember that first night she tried to paint me as the villain. In the end, it wasn't my tractor or my evidence that brought her down. It was her own refusal to let go of the rope even as it tightened around her. So what do you think? Where's the line between standing your ground and escalating a feud? When does justice become obsession? Drop your thoughts below. Let's hear where you stand on neighborhood wars, community justice, and what it really means to win.